Must be Sunday. Well, hello, Glue Troopers. Max of Max's Models here. And today we're going to talk about the kit and the airplane, the Fairchild Republic T-46. This was supposed to be the Air Force's new primary trainer back in the mid-'80s. I actually remember when this was all going on. It was quite the little debacle. And it spelled the end of Fairchild Republic aircraft. Back in the late 70s, the Air Force realized that they were just beating the crap out of their Cessna T-37 Tweets, the $250,000 dog whistle, and that they needed a new trainer and primary trainer, something that would be rugged, but something that would also be quieter, more fuel efficient, more capable, etc., etc. An upgrade. So initially, Cessna actually didn't show much interest in it. In fact, the thing that got me on this was I saw Ron Rogers' video this morning about where he met Joe Kittinger, the famous parachutist, but he met Kittinger when he was working as a contractor for Cessna when they finally decided they did want to get into the program, and which the T-46 eventually won. Cessna came up with basically an updated T-37 Tweet, and they had a lot of other cool ideas of things to do with the T-37 platform, some of which actually came to fruition, but basically they just realized they weren't really that interested in it when the rubber hit the road, so they got out of it, and Fairchild managed to get the contract. And I remember when this was going on, I was in the Army, and it was seemingly a really simple thing. I mean, a replacement primary trainer, pretty straightforward idea. Given the state of technology at the day, that shouldn't have been a thing, but apparently the Air Force wanted a lot of stuff. A lot of computers, high bypass, quiet, low maintenance turbofan, some stuff that quite frankly at the time just didn't really exist. And so Republic had its hands full. They went to Garrett and said, hey, there's no off-the-shelf engine and turbofan that can do these things. So Garrett's like, yeah, we can come up with one. They started working on their Garrett F109 engine. This kind of broke one of the golden rules of aircraft development. You really shouldn't develop a new airframe and a new engine and test them together because you're just putting so many unknowns into the sky. But that was what the Air Force wanted, and the big bosses wanted lots of computers and stuff, so the airplane wound up being pretty overticked, or at least that seems to be a common belief about it. So once I got the contract, and Fairchild Republic needed this contract because the A-10 aircraft that they've been building was basically, the production line was about to shut down. It was coming to an end. And they were working with Saab on the SF-340, Saab Fairchild 340, commuter airliner, and which eventually turned into a great airplane, was very successful. But they were having a lot of problems with their end of it, and after only about 50 units, they got out of it. So I think they were making the wings and tails, but and also they'd had some issues inside the company, and there were some morale issues and stuff, and they were really trying to get all the A-10s done, so they were pushing their capacity to the limit. And you remember, even though the A-10 was nearing completion, it was still going on, and that was the primary thing that was absorbing the bulk of their staff. So they didn't have the resources they probably should have, the intellectual and design resources to go towards the T-46 that they should have. And they also agreed with the Air Force basically to make a batch of them while they were still effectively designing the airplane. Everybody was trying to save money. So the first thing they did was the Fairchild Republic contracted with Ames Industries for a 62% scale version. Ames, of course, went to, who do you go to when you need a scaled miniature? Burt Rutan, Scaled Composites. And they built the 62% scale single-seat airplane to test out the aerodynamics with his brother Dick Rutan doing the flying. And this was known as the Model 73 NGT, or Next Generation Trainer, which wouldn't make a bad little kit in its own right. But it was a one-off, and it was flying by September of '81. The basic design proved out to be okay. They start producing their first aircraft. It flew 6 months late, which, given all the new technologies, really isn't a surprise. The Air Force forgave that. But it had doubled in price. It was supposed to be in a $1.5 million airplane, and now it was a $3 million airplane. And this, by 1985, they had a legal thing called the Gramm-Rudman-Hollings Balanced Budget Act, which mandated spending cuts for the government and limited the national debt. And the T-46 got caught up in the middle of that. And Secretary of the Air Force Russell A. Rourke eventually canceled the procurement, which killed the program. And the airplane had a bunch of little nicknames, the Thunder Piglet and the Javelina and the Eliminator. That last one came about because it's supposedly the flight test program. Well, but before it was canceled, they got the airplane and they got a few of them, started flying them, testing them, and a lot of things came to the fore that happens with new aircraft. One of them is that the airplane had about 50% more drag than was anticipated. And when they did things like the shooting the dead chicken at the windshield, it went right through. I think it wound up going into the cockpit, breaking the seal, going into the cockpit, and shattering the compass, which sent fragments all over the place. It was when you pulled the speed brakes, it had a nasty buffet. There was a lot of stuff. In fact, the only way they have, which is funny because the test pilots actually said the thing's easy to fly. It was a good handling little airplane. It was easy to take off, easy to land, probably would have been a good trainer. I've read in some places, unfortunately, because the Air Force still taught spins, that it had some spin recovery issues. Now, these things all could have been worked out had the program continued, but it wasn't getting anywhere near the speed that was required without putting in a pretty steep dive, and it was burning more fuel. And, of course, this brand new engine, a turbofan, has a lot of issues when you start doing things like stalls and spins and stuff, and they were just packing all this new stuff into one package, and they needed more time to get the bugs worked out. Also, a lot of people felt that Republic had some issues. In fact, several forums that I went on to had family members that worked there or had found books, and they talked about some of the things they listed were reduced investment levels in plant facilities and equipment, centralized capabilities, deteriorating employee morale, inadequate emphasis on quality and safety and schedule in some of the product systems, failure at most levels in the workforce to meet productivity targets, way too much optimism forecasting, particularly new program proposals, which caused a lot of cost overruns. I mean, they're a little too much pie in the sky. And management had put out these development and succession plans that weren't followed. So there were a lot of internal issues. And some people really liked the airplane and some really hated it. But they had just a lot of requirements that were counter each other. This had 0-0 ejection seats in it, which are very heavy in this tiny little airplane. And those little turbofans are out there working as hard as they can. Apparently, they learned that if you took off and failed an engine with the landing gear still hanging, it couldn't hold altitude, which isn't really that uncommon in multi-engine aircraft. The whole idea is to clean the gear up to get it to fly, but you would think out of a little two-place jet it would have enough juice to go around on one engine with the gear hanging, but it apparently couldn't. So there was just a lot of stuff, but the main thing I think that killed it was just this is the time of cutting budgets and everything and getting the government spending under control. The thing had doubled in price and looked like it may go up again, so they decided to kill it. And more, it's still pretty controversial. The airplane probably could have been turned into a first-rate little trainer, but it needed a lot more investment and a lot more attention than it was getting. And this is what I've been able to ferret out from all the forums and documents. But I did actually find the budget office, general accounting office documents on it. And it goes back and forth. You know, one side it says it's a nice flying little airplane that's meeting a lot of its target goals. But on the other hand, the product quality and the production capabilities and everything are lagging, and a lot of stuff was going wrong with the program. Maybe if the A-10 had already finished its production run, they could put the whole staff on the T-46 and gave them a little more time, it would have worked out better. Some people think that all the computers and stuff they wanted to wedge in there were causing too many problems, that the old veteran guys, if they'd been left to their own devices to kind of build it old school, they could have given everybody what they wanted, cheaper, faster, cleaner. But the big bosses wanted lots of fancy electronics. And essentially, I don't think the technical problems were what killed it. I think it was the procurement issues. And they just came on at the wrong time. The government said, hey, we got to tighten our belt. And trainers aren't sexy, so we're going to put the money into other things. So they just revamped the T-37s and got another 20 years out of them. But not exactly what the Air Force wanted, but you work with what you got. Now, of course, we have the T-6 Texan II, which is an amazing airplane and apparently much simpler. Fairchild was, I believe, overticked. But except for a couple of resin makers, Sova-M was the only company I could find that makes a kit of what, could have been a pretty cool airplane. And it sort of was, but, it was what it was. The T-46 came and the T-46 went. Unfortunately, they have been preserved. They're in museums. One's at Air Force, the Museum of the United States Air Force at Wright-Patt, and a couple others. And I think the little 62 percenters in Cradle of Aviation Museum, and a couple. I think one's at, undergoing a museum restoration. I forget exactly where the others ended up, but I do believe they're all still around. So there's that. So again, I'll put the link below to the build video on it. And guys, I hope you don't mind my going down the rabbit hole on this little Sunday. Just something to do. Oh, little side note. Actually, a couple little side notes now that I think about it. Kind of just little cute add-ons. One is that Fairchild Republic was so tight for money that when they went to have factory models made, they could not afford topping models, so they went to the Toy and Model Corporation, who made the factory models cheaper. And supposedly, some people had such a low opinion of the airplane that when one of them left Edwards Air Force Base to go to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base after the program termination, its destination was the Air Force Museum. They were going to, this is something we played with. We've got a bunch of them. We'll stick one in the Air Force Museum. Well, the Air Force Systems Command boss heard about the mission and countermanded the orders and had it sent out to the boneyard in Davis-Monthan, stating his reason being that this piece of does not come back here. Even though eventually one did, but he didn't want it at Wright-Patterson. He thought it was that bad. I'm not sure why, but, I've heard a lot of rumors about the plane. It's hard to get any real accurate information on it. But like I say, throw enough money at anything, you'll probably fix the problems. And this probably could have been saved, but it wasn't. And that's all I have to say about that. Guys, take care of yourselves. And as always, model on.